What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my top 24 tight end rankings for the 2025 fantasy football season. I've already gone through my running back, wide receiver, and quarterback rankings. Tight ends will be in this video, and then tomorrow I will go through my top 100 overall player rankings before I start to get into like my week one content, start sits, rankings, waiver wire, all of that stuff. If you guys enjoyed the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button, subscribe. If you want my full top 200 rankings, those are free for you guys. Link is in the description. But let's just dive right into it here. I'm not trying to go super in depth on every player, just kind of a quick hitter video for you guys. But starting off in tier one, I have Brock Bowers and Trey McBride. Now, if I really wanted to nitpick, there could be like a mini tier break here. I do view Brock Bowers as like the clear-cut tight end one. He's someone I'd consider in the early second round, but I also like McBride. These are both guys that I'd be taking in round two. Just guys who are going to command a lot of volume. I think Brock Bowers is set up to be like the next Travis Kelce, just in terms of like that early round tight end that year after year is going to pan out. I do think that's like realistic upside for Bowers. And then Trey McBride, just consistently peppered with targets last year. Clearly, him and Kyler have a ton of chemistry. He was extended this offseason. I think he is going to be a high-end tight end one. Then in tier two, I have George Kittle. I do think he's in a tier by himself. I do think there's a pretty big gap between the tight end 3 and then the tight end 4, but I do think he slightly trails both Bowers and McBride, and a big part of it is just the projected volume. Like, I think Brock Bowers and Trey McBride are going to blow Kittle out of the water just in terms of their overall target number. Now, Kittle could certainly kill with efficiency, touchdowns, but I just feel like Bowers and McBride have a much higher floor. Then looking at tier 3, this is also going to be a one-man tier, and it is Sam Laporta. Now, I did consider like bunching Laporta in with a bunch of tight ends that I have ranked in tier 4, but I am going to give him the slight edge. He's a talented young tight end coming off a disappointing season, but he did flash some upside as a rookie. I think he is going to be, a top candidate to lead the tight end position in touchdowns just based on the offense he is playing in. So he will be in tier 3, but I do think, like I said, there's a pretty huge gap between Kittle and Laporta. So just because I'm taking Kittle in like round 3, that doesn't mean I'm interested in Laporta in like round 4, round 5. I want to wait at tight end if I'm not getting one of those top 3. And then tier 4 is going to be a pretty large tier. We have Evan Ingram, TJ Hawkinson, Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, Colston Loveland, Tyler Warren, David Njoku, and Tucker Kraft. And it's just like as more and more time went on, the more I just started pushing these tight ends super close together. Even when you're looking at like the Vegas betting lines, these guys really aren't separating from each other. They're all like in between like 575 to 700 receiving yard lines. Touchdowns can be pretty volatile. No one's really pulling away as like a top volume option. And so I will start off this tier with Evan Ingram, probably a little bit higher on him than consensus. I just think he's a tight end who's proven he can command a lot of volume. I like the offense he's going in here with Sean Payton. I think he could kind of play that Joker role. Sean Payton could move him around, use him creatively. And then there's also just like not a ton of other top targets, right? Like you have Cortland Sutton. Outside of that, not a ton of proven assets. And so at the tight end position, to find that upside, you ideally are going to be a top 2 target in your offense. I think that is very reasonable here for Evan Ingram. Then I have TJ Hawkinson. Obviously, last year, you're pretty much just throwing out because he was coming off of the torn ACL. Obviously, there's some concern with a rookie quarterback in JJ McCarthy, but in 2023, like Hawkinson was a true high-end tight end one. I still think Kevin O'Connell is going to have this offense operating at a pretty high level. And then I think the suspension to Jordan Addison does give TJ Hawkinson a little bit of a boost. So I think he'll be fine. I think he'll be a mid-tier tight end one, but I'm not necessarily expecting him to bounce like all the way back to his 2023 numbers. Then I'm going to go with Mark Andrews. He's a really interesting player to look at because when you look at his efficiency numbers last year, the touchdowns, he was super productive, right? He was getting into the end zone on like a yards per route run perspective. He was great, but we saw a big hit in his route participation, his overall target share, and that's definitely a red flag. But then you could also see the upside where it's like, if he was that efficient, it seems like he's not falling off as a player. Plus you have the Isaiah Likely injury. So it's like, do we see Mark Andrews overall like route participation, target share bounce back to pre-2024 levels? If that's the case, he's probably a steal at this spot. But there's also the downside where if he keeps the same overall role from last year, but doesn't hit in the touchdown department, then he's probably going to be a big disappointment at this pick. So not someone who's like a screaming target for me, but If he starts to slip in the mid rounds, I'd be fine taking him. Then I have Travis Kelce. I think there are some people who are projecting a big bounce back for Kelce. I'm not really one of those people. He had just been so consistent for so long, and then he really did just take a significant dip last year. I don't think it's a shocker that that's coinciding with him like really getting up there in age. His efficiency really tanked, his ability to break tackles completely plummeted. And so I think he's someone who still can command volume, especially in those weeks with no Rashee Rice. But I'd be pretty surprised if he bounced back to like high end tight end one production. Then I have the rookies back to back in Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren. Now, some people might think this is too high, right? I have them in this tier with these proven high end tight end ones like a Mark Andrews, a Travis Kelce. And I do understand that. I just think this year, Andrews and Kelce don't have super high ceilings. Loveland and Warren don't have super established floors, but they're both talented prospects. I think they're both going to get strong usage in their offenses. And I do think they come with a lot of upside where we have seen in recent years, right? A Sam Laporta, a Brock Bowers come in and produce right away. I do want to make it clear these guys are not close to the same like prospect level of a Brock Bowers, but they are more in like that Sam Laporta range. I like Colston Loveland's, upside in this Bears offense. Tyler Warren, I'm not super high on the Colts offense, but his usage in the preseason was great. Like right out of the gate, he's going to be operating as the full-time tight end, getting great route participation numbers. And I think Daniel Jones can be fine enough to get some of these targets involved. Someone who I moved down a couple of spots is David Njoku. And this is a real dilemma for me because from a player perspective, I really like David Njoku. I think he is a great tight end. I think he's super talented. I also think Joe Flacco being announced as a starter is big for him. We saw in 2023, he went on a really hot stretch when Joe Flacco took over. Flacco's out there slinging it, not going to be super passive, right? Not going to play it safe. He's going to give his weapons opportunities. But you also have kind of like the emergence of Harold Fannin Jr., where he was getting legit work with the ones, and David Njoku's role was kind of suffering because of that. And this is not like Harold Fannin's going to take over as like the inline tight end. That's not his role. He's someone who's going to work in the slot. They're going to move him around. But Njoku's route participation was not great. And also, like, if you're going to get some of these manufactured touches to the tight ends, and some of those are going to Harold Fannin, that definitely does cut into his upside. So if you wanted to put him higher than this, I totally get it. If Harold Fannin like was not in the mix and I wasn't a believer in him as a player, I think you could argue Njoku up in like the Ingram Hawkinson tier. Like with Flacco at quarterback, I do think the upside could be that high, but I am a little bit sketched out, so he's going to be more towards the bottom of this tier. And then someone who I did just recently move up here, Tucker Kraft, just a talented young tight end, looked good last year, pretty open group of weapons where you haven't had one guy like really emerge as the top dog. So on a good passing attack, also has the upside to hit in the touchdown department. I do like Tucker Kraft here to close out my top 12 tight ends. Now moving into tier 5, I have Dallas Goedert, Jake Ferguson, Dalton Kincaid. Goddard and Ferguson are more of like these higher floor, lower ceiling options. If you don't get an early round tight end, I'm totally fine punting the position and scooping up one of these guys. Dallas Goedert, despite like never hitting big in the touchdown department, has still been a very reliable like back end tight end one play. And then for Jake Ferguson, was not good last year, but he's going to be on a good offense. I do think he has that touchdown upside. But obviously the ceiling's capped because at best he's going to be like the number 3 target. And then Dalton Kincaid, he's kind of just like a wild card here where you do want pieces of this Bills offense. I really liked Kincaid as a prospect, but he has been wildly underwhelming in his first couple of seasons in the NFL. I don't think he's necessarily being used optimally, right? But that's kind of the problem with these Bills weapons where they have so many guys who probably thrive out of the slot. I think Keon Coleman could be a big slot. You have Dalton Kincaid who could be playing there, but they've kind of made their commitment to Khalil Shakir. And I'm not really saying it's like the wrong choice. Like just because one guy might be used optimally somewhere else, that doesn't mean that's the best overall move for the team. But tight ends, historically have been slow to develop. We've seen them have these like later breakouts, year 4, year 5, potentially year 3. So all hope is not lost here for Dalton Kincaid. He could take a leap this year. And like worst case scenario, he's still someone who has a decent amount of touchdown upside playing in this Bills offense. Then getting into tier 6, I have Hunter Henry, Kyle Pitts, Brenton Strange, Zach Ertz, and Jonnu Smith. Hunter Henry, I just think, is a super safe, like later round tight end pick, where if you do go with a Colston Loveland, a Tyler Warren, you could snag Hunter Henry as your tight end too, and he's the guy you have some trust starting in week 1. For Kyle Pitts, I'm kind of just accepting that this is going to be the year where Kyle Pitts fully breaks out. I've been super in on him, loved him as a prospect. I've been higher on him in the consensus over the last few years. So it's only right that once I finally move him down, that's when he is going to have that big season. I do think it's tough to have him higher though, right? He's flopped in multiple consecutive years. He's got this skill set where it's like, you don't really want to play him in line because he's not great there. But then when you put him in the slot, then he's just getting guarded by like corners, and that's not necessarily a great matchup for him. So these like kind of hybrid tight ends haven't been faring super well. Like that's kind of the Dalton Kincaid problem where it's like, do you actually want that player in the slot if you could just have a slot wide receiver? So we'll see with Pitts. I'm rooting for him, but it's tough for me to be overly invested. Then I have Brenton Strange, young tight end, stepping into that tight end 1 role with Evan Ingram gone. Could be someone who, breaks out early on in the season. Fun offense. I am a believer in Trevor Lawrence. I like Liam Cohen coming in here. Maybe we see something out of Brenton Strange. Zach Ertz, definitely more of the floor play, but going to be one of the top targets on a good offense here with the Commanders. Still has some juice left in the tank, right? Like he's not going to be the, prime Zach Ertz, but he can be a serviceable, like fringe start at the tight end position. And then I have Jonnu Smith. Really weird 2024 where he's not super involved early on in the season. And then in the back half, he just becomes like the focal point of the offense. Ends up getting traded to the Steelers. You do have Pat Freiermuth in that tight end room, but outside of DK Metcalf, like the weapons are just non-existent. So it is possible he plays a pretty significant role. Plus, we know that Arthur Smith definitely loves him, some Jonnu Smith. And then this final tier here, tier 7, I have Isaiah Likely, Chigo Okonkwo, Mason Taylor, Kate Otten, and then I'll throw Harold Fannin in there as the tight end 25. For Isaiah Likely has shown flashes, especially when Mark Andrews has missed time, but he's dealing with a foot injury, and it's just tough to see like him having a ton of upside if Mark Andrews is actually healthy and in the lineup. Then I have Chigo Okonkwo, has shown some flashes in his first few years in the NFL, has had some nice efficiency numbers. Maybe this is the year where he finally breaks out with Cam Ward. Like maybe Cam Ward overachieves and Chigo Okonkwo is kind of the beneficiary of that. Then I have Mason Taylor. Interesting tight end prospect. This is more of a bet on the situation where it's like, yeah, the passing attack isn't going to be great, but outside of Garrett Wilson, there's just nothing going on at the wide receiver or the tight end position. So if he is talented and can get on the field, he's going to at least have an opportunity to produce. Then I have Kate Otten, kind of an interesting 2024 where when you had the other weapons healthy, or at least like one stud wide receiver, whether that was Chris Godwin or Mike Evans, he was pretty much unplayable. But then you had this stretch where both Evans and Godwin were out, and all of a sudden Kate Otten was like a must-start tight end. But he kind of broke my brain a little bit because typically when you're talking about pass-catching weapons, just because, a starter goes down or a stud wide receiver goes down, it doesn't necessarily mean that someone's just going to be plugged in and produce right away because targets are earned, not given. This is not the running back position where if Saquon goes down, you can just give the ball to Will Shipley 20 times a game. You have to earn those targets, and you could argue it even becomes tougher because now there's, more coverage aimed at you. But Kate Otten broke that, right? So the weapons weren't there. All of a sudden, he's balling out. And then my take after that was like, all right, I was a little bit too low on him. Even with Evans returning, I think he's proven he's a talented player. He can still be productive. And then Evans gets back and his production just completely tanks. So maybe you can talk yourself into like Chris Godwin's banged up. Jalen McMillan is banged up, but you still have Mike Evans healthy. You have Emeka Egbuka, who I'm very high on. So tough to see a lot of upside there with Kate Otten. And then the final guy here, Harold Fannin Jr., I don't think he's going to be fantasy relevant with Njoku on this roster, but this Browns team is not going to be good. David Njoku entering a contract year, like he's going to be done after this year. It's very possible he gets traded at some point. And the fact that Harold Fannin's already working in with the ones, I think is super exciting. I'm not advocating you go out and draft him unless you're in like a super deep league, but someone to really keep an eye on, especially if those David Njoku trade rumors start to heat up. But that is going to wrap it up for my top 25 tight end rankings. If you guys enjoyed the video, smash the like button, subscribe. You can get my rankings in the description. But thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.